Yeah. Okay. Brother Kwame, you have been living and working in the Republic of Guinea for many, many years now. You are a founding member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and you have been working hand in hand with the Democratic Party of Guinea for some time. Could you please tell us something about the relationship between the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the Democratic Party of Guinea, and your role in both, if possible?
The Democratic Party of Guinea grew out of what was known as the RDA, the Rassemblement Démocratique Africain in French, the Democratic African Assembly. This was a Pan-African formation of countries which were colonized by the French. The Democratic Party of Guinea became the branch of the RDA inside of Guinea. This was 1947. Secretary Ture was not the first General Secretary of the PDG, Democratic Party of Guinea, in French, Parti Démocratique de Guinée. If my memory serves me correctly, Amadou, he was the third or the fourth Secretary General of the PDG, Secretary. I think he was the third or the fourth. Osajifo, Kwame and Nkrumah founded the All African People's Revolutionary Party when he was here in Guinea as co-president. As co-president of Guinea, he was able to devote his time to properly analyzing Africa and her revolutionary needs to a rapid movement towards the socialist unification of Africa. And it was here that he was able to complete the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. He had already sketched earlier notes for the books, but when the reactionary regime took power in their stupidity, they passed those notes on to the CIA. It was so stupid they probably didn't get paid for it. So when in Guinea he had to reconstruct, and this is where the All African People's Revolutionary Party is first properly expressed publicly. I had the honor of reading the book in its manuscript form when I first visited Guinea here in 1967 at the invitation of the Democratic Party of Guinea to attend the 8th Congress, which was the Congress of the Cultural Socialist Revolution. So when I came to Guinea in 1967 and I met Osajifo, and both he and Secretary Ture were co-presidents of Guinea, he invited me to come back to be a secretary, and President Secretary invited me to come back to Guinea since it was my home. So maybe they were being polite, but I was serious. When I returned to the United States, I had all intentions of coming right back to Guinea. But the American government illegally seized my passport and kept it for some 9 or 10 months before I was able to return to Guinea. Immediately upon my return in Guinea, I was working under both President Secretary and President Kwame Nkrumah. So with the aid, the PDG, of course, was already the party in power. It was moving along to the level of party state. So I just functioned as a militant inside the PDG, and the AAPRP were beginning and began the first circles here in Guinea with those who were around the staff of Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah.
Recently, at the 13th Congress of the Democratic Party of Guinea, you were elected to the Central Committee of the PDG. Can you tell us what implications that will have for the All African People's Revolutionary Party and possibly the movement to formulate or to bring about an All African Council for Political Coordination?
Certainly it's a great honor for the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It certainly advances Pan-Africanism. While certainly we've had others who've come to do that, George Padmore most notably in the time of Osajifo. This is an advancement because it's a concrete manifestation of the vote by the people, not put on by the leadership. So for us in the AAPRP, it advances our work of the All-African Committee for Political Coordination. This All-African Committee for Political Coordination has been outlined in Osagyefo's book, The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. The All-African People's Revolutionary Party has kept this theory alive for 25 years before being able to concretize it. It simply states the fastest way for Africa to truly unify. Osagyefo, as we all know, was one of the main strugglers and workers for the Organization of African Unity. Of course, he didn't just build the Organization of African Unity thinking that African unity could come from the top down, that is to say, from the heads of states. He really put emphasis on the All-African People's Organization. He called the All-African Heads of State meeting in April of 1957, 57, in April 15th. And then in that same period, called for the All-African People's Organization by December. That would mean uniting Africa from the bottom up. He never assumed it could be united from the top down. After all, he was involved in struggles with all these reactionary heads of state, so he knew how reactionary they were, how corrupt they were, so he couldn't assume that they were going to organize Africa from the top down. But that was to neutralize them and to make them at least give lip service to African unity. So it was from the bottom up that it was to come. Of course, you always go from a movement to a party because a movement is more amorphous, a party is more precise. And in revolution, we're always looking for more precision. So Osagyefo was able to see the necessity for a party on a continental-wide base. Of course, everybody sees that and understands it. Now, we're talking about a unique party here. We're not talking about multi-partyism. As a matter of fact, the discussion is not between multi-partyism and one party. It's a question between capitalism and socialism. Wherever socialism is being built, wherever socialism exists, there's one party. Whether it's the mass party or the vanguard party. Wherever capitalism exists, there's multi-party to fool the people and let them think there is democracy and they have a choice, obviously. So we're not confused here. As socialists, we're speaking of a one-party system. And Osagyefo saw that the only way to do this was to integrate all the existing mass revolutionary parties into one body. Thus, the All-African Committee for Political Coordination does this. What it does is brings together the central committee of all these parties. For example, the Pan-Africanist Congress as a party would come together with its central committee of the PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau, the Party for African Independence of Guinea and Cape. So they would come together, their central committees, of course, and begin to iron out the lots of conflicts they have among themselves, but those central committee would now become a broader central committee representing the members of PAIGC and of PAC. Consequently, this process, continuing all over, to be able to do it, we said the All-African People's Revolutionary Party is probably the one of the revolutionary parties in the African world that knows the AACPC better than any other revolutionary party functioning in the African world. After all, Nkrumah is the founder of our party, so we have to know the All-African Committee for Political Coordination, and we've been discussing it for 25 years. And this is a solid advance for us, because where we were thinking of getting the PDG to come and merge with the central, for example, we take the Central Committee of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, of which I've had the honor of serving, and take the PDG, which I've never been responsible in the PDG, just an ordinary militant, and merge these two central committees together. But now I am a Central Committee member of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party and a Central Committee of the Democratic Party of Guinea. So the process itself has even surpassed our wildest thoughts and imagination. Once the PDG is back in power, even in the struggle to get back in power, the All-African People's Revolutionary Party and the Democratic Party of Guinea are now completely solidified in their actions towards advancing the African Revolution.
Okay. I would like to touch on the question of ideology and culture in relation to the issue of socialism. Our party, the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, are committed to socialism. We know that most progressive Pan-Africanist parties are dealing with the issue of socialism. In the light of the collapse of socialism in the East, in the Soviet Union, and these countries. How do you see or envisage socialist transformation taking place in Africa that will benefit the masses of African people in the light of it being undermined at the moment? The issue of socialism, I mean.
Osaji Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Toure, Amilcar Cabral, Malcolm X, and many other African revolutionaries have always pointed to the fact that Africa must first begin a cultural revolution. Of course, many people laughed at this, called it reactionary, etc., etc., etc. But if you go look outside of Europe, many of these countries are really struggling over this question of cultural revolution. If you look at China, what swept China during Mao was the Cultural Revolution. If you look at Asia, if you look at Africa, if you look at South and Central America, you will see Cultural Revolution. Cultural Revolution itself, for whatever reasons, has not yet taken grasp within the revolutionary mold in Europe. For us, as African revolutionaries, we think this is a critical point because we know the culture of Europe is racist. And unless a cultural struggle is waged inside of Europe against European racist culture by Europeans, this racist culture even tinges revolutionaries through Europeans. Consequently, we are clear here on this point. We understand that socialism was not invented by Karl Marx. It cannot be. It is a universal truth. Marx's great contribution to human society was in the area of dialectical and historical materialism. But anyone can find socialism just looking for the truth. It's a universal truth. Thus, we as African revolutionaries have never been confused into thinking, number one, first of all, that we cannot find socialism on our own. We want to say clearly here that the work of Karl Marx advances everyone who really wants to know socialism in studying it, understanding it, and we will never deny that. I will read Karl Marx, V.I. Lenin, Engels until my death. Of that there isn't the slightest question. But we're saying that without reading them, we Africans can find socialism by ourselves. This is a clear fact, just like the laws of gravity were founded by Newton. But any African in Timbuktu who's doing experiments with the laws of gravity will come to the same conclusion without prior knowledge of Newton. Thus, we were never confused on that point. The second point we were not confused on, for which we were attacked severely by European socialists, was the point of ideology. We had said that ideology must come from culture, must come from your culture. And if it doesn't come from your culture, it will not be able to mobilize the people. Let me give you just a quick example. Africa's culture is very rich with spirituality. Her contributions to world religions are outstanding. She gave Judaism to the world. She stabilized Christianity for the world. She saved Islam for the world at a time of great danger. Europe has produced no universal religion. All universal religions entered Europe from the outside. Judaism entered from the outside. Christianity entered from the outside. Islam entered from the outside. And not in early stages, but in rather developed stages. So if we would look at the culture of Europe and Africa, we would see in the culture of Europe that their relationship to spirituality is not the same as Africa. Marxism-Leninism, as an ideology, has as one of its tenets atheism. The African people do not understand this concept given their culture. We've seen these errors already. The reason why the communist parties have not grown in these countries is simply because of this principle of atheism, which is a principle. That is, you cannot be a Marxist-Leninist unless you are an atheist. So that means that if we come to preach revolution in Africa, before arriving at revolution, we have to convert all these believers who've been believers for centuries into being atheists before they become Marxist-Leninists. This ideology will never mobilize the masses of our people at this time. No ideology which does not account for God will mobilize our people at this time. This is a social reality based on our culture. It can go on in Europe, but cannot. So from early life, we understood that the ideology of Marxism-Leninism, because of its cultural base, would not do to mobilize our people. We extracted the universal truths from it, but as an ideology, which would be total and encompassing, it could not be. It must come from our people's culture. It must be able to mobilize our people. All cultures produce music, some to one degree greater than the other. African culture depends heavily on music. Thus, even if you will look at its political rallies, music and culture are important means of always rallying the people. Even at your African Liberation Day in England, you will have cultural affairs. And this is important. In other cultures, it doesn't exist, so you must have your ideology coming. And finally, some people think that power is on the level only of execution, of carrying out the acts, of being able to do. But power begins with conception. And if one doesn't conceive in one's culture, one is conceiving in another's culture, then that person in whose culture you are conceiving will control you, control your every actions. So you must understand that power begins with the level of conception. And Africans conceive things differently from Asians, from Europeans, given their cultural aspect in the terms of their struggle. We're not speaking of universal truths here. We're speaking about the specificities, the particularities of the areas.
Thank you. Ture was very strong on the issue of culture. Amilcar Cabral was also strong on the issue of culture, and other great Pan-Africanists. Can you expand a little bit more on that example of culture you gave, religion, for example? And can you expand a little bit more on the role of religion in the process and the transformation towards one unified, socialist, liberated Africa?
If one will look at the role of religion in Europe, one will see it was always adjoined to the state and was used as a powerful weapon. As a matter of fact, princes used to kill popes and appoint popes to make the popes appoint them as the heads of state. So we can always see even this struggle of separation of state and that church was really a result of European struggle. It didn't exist anywhere else in any other part of the world. The error, of course, we make sometimes is that we allow European particular history to become universal history. And this, of course, we must not do. We must understand its particularity and extrapolate from it to go to its universals, but not take it particular as a universal history. Thus, the struggle of religion in Europe is entirely different from that of other places. We might add one other thing. The culture of Europe is a highly intolerant culture, especially on the question of religion. If you will look at the culture, if you will look at the history of Europe, you will see that Christians were burnt at the stake. You will see that Muslims were burnt at the stake. You will see that Jews were burnt at the stake. You will see that unbelievers were burnt at the stake. And this is a constant history. Even most of those who went to America to help develop it, they were fleeing religious intolerance in Europe. We just spoke of the Jews being burnt at the stake as late as the 1940s. If you will look at Africa, on the question of religious differences, Africa is dominantly tolerant. We're not saying that there are not clashes here and there between, yes, but we're saying it's dominantly tolerant, whereas in European culture, it's dominantly intolerant. If one sees the history of this, one could come to understand Marx and Engels' statement within a European cultural basis that, one, that religion is the opium of the masses. But this statement makes no sense within the context of African culture. None whatsoever. None whatsoever. Because we said it's dominantly tolerant. Thus, in Africa, religion must go hand in hand with the revolutionary process. As a matter of fact, just universally, we don't see why not. All the things that religion speak about is the same thing that revolution speaks about. Religion speaks about people treating each other as equal, where there's justice, total justice. All religions speak of total justice. This is what revolution wants, nothing but justice. Nothing but total justice. Nothing that every other man should treat every other woman as he himself wants to be treated. That's all we want.
We have seen examples on our trip to Farina, Dabola, of the PDG working closely with the imams who have influence. And in a way, we've seen an example of the absolute harmony of religion and revolution. Can I change the topic slightly and ask you a couple of questions relating to our line on the nation class analysis on two issues: the issue of Palestine and the issue of Azania and their connectedness as well. We see in Palestine at the moment a peace process being got underway, and we see the Palestinian Liberation Organization moving in a direction to establish a lasting peace. We also see in Azania the right-wing forces there calling out for a state within a state. How do you view these developments in terms of our nation-class analysis? Brother?
All right, just to start from your last point, of course, we must always look at the moral issues involved for a state within a state. If you look at the Palestinians' cry of a state within a state, and you look at the settlers' cry in Zambia, South Africa, for a state within a state, then you see there's no moral basis here. Certainly the Palestinians have every moral basis, but the settlers in Zambia, South Africa have no moral basis at all. That's clear. So we must look very carefully at both of these processes, because some people do try to make comparisons with them. It's a moral basis we should look at. We, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, have the honor of chairing the Worldwide African Anti-Zionist Front. Therefore, the struggles of the PLO at present and its internal contradictions are ones that we ourselves cannot afford to be involved in for any number of reasons. Number one, we do not want to be involved in the internal discussions of anybody else's revolution, because we do not look kindly on anyone who tries to interfere with the internal contradictions of the African revolution, any non-Africans. So we do not involve ourselves in it. We know that the PLO at this point is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and that all of the actions which President Arafat is carrying out have been sanctioned by a majority of this body. So we see here a move which, well, if you will, put them almost in relationship with that of the Bantustans in Tanzania and South Africa. The Palestinians have waged a bloody struggle. And we know that this struggle cannot be compromised by any. This is clear. So their advancement towards regaining their territory, towards regaining their land, towards a lasting peace, all we have to do is, once PLO is a legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and that has been a majority vote and there's been no violation of the democratic principles, we are to support the PLO. That is our only position here. The Azanian process, the process in South Africa, is one which we have to look very carefully at. One thing is certain: in both Palestine and Azania, South Africa, the enemy, the settlers, are doing their very best to create neo-colonial structures. This is to be properly understood. Thus, the revolutionary forces here have to understand, as some certainly do, that while struggling with them, there must be understood that they're trying to transform the struggle into neo-colonial results, and that the only results will be revolutionary results which will be able to satisfy the masses of the people. Simply put, those who do not follow the struggle to the end and seek to compromise the end quickly for a neo-colonial position will only smear themselves in history. That's all they will do, because the people are going to arrive at their total liberation. No force on earth can stop Africa from being unified and socialist. Thus, the methods used, the strategy and the tactics applied may differ, but we are convinced of the results. Africa is going to be for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Africa will be a unified socialist continent. Palestine will be regained by the Palestinian people, and it shall be a just and mundane nation.
Thank you. One last question. We noticed that the campaign has begun for the PDG struggle to regain power, and elections are to be held in December. What measures are being taken by the PDG to ensure that free and fair elections are held? Has there been a constituent assembly? What process of registration has gone on? Is there to be some kind of a provisional government that will lead to some kind of democratic settlement? Can you comment briefly on those, brother?
Well, all of these things have not yet been decided, although there's been great struggle. And the struggle, of course, will continue. But for the PDG, if the elections came yesterday, we know we would win. For us, there's no problem at all. We were a mass party who served here for 26 years while in power. We presented concrete benefits to the mass of the people, which in 9 years of neocolonialism has totally eroded. So any choice given, we don't have to worry about that. Aside from that, there are 8 candidates. All other 7 are based on ethnic politics. All of them. The PDG is the only one that has a national setting. We have all ethnic groups represented inside the PDG on every level, and always have had. So even if those 7 were to win, each of them could only win within their ethnic group area. So if the PDG is even defeated in their ethnic group areas on a nationwide basis, they have to win. So we're not worried about it. Of course, we are going to make sure that all proper precautions are taken so that we will be ensured that we in fact have a proper elections which are fair, that there is no slightest question. So our strategy is involved in moving along here step by step to ensure this. But if it's not going to be a fair election, there's clear, and there's not transparency, there's clear that there will be no elections.
Thank you. Finally, what message do you have for the brothers and sisters in the Britain chapter, not just in the Britain chapter, but in Europe and in the diaspora generally, with regards to developments taking place in Africa?
All right, well, for those in the Britain chapter of the AAPRP, I would really emphasize to them that they represent an example of that which is absolutely indispensable in our people's victory, an organized Africa. And that this example which they represent, they must understand properly the weight which they carry. They have to remain in this organization until they die, or, as we always say, if you leave the AAPRP, be sure to join another, at least hopefully, revolutionary organization, but if not any other organization. This is clear. So those in the AAPRP must understand properly the weight, the example that they represent for the masses of our people. They have to multiply themselves a millionfold, so that every African will become just like them, an organized African, putting the interests of Africa above all else. This must be properly understood by them, and of course the eternal march here must be understood. We know in the first thing we read in our work-study circle from Secretary Ture, the necessity to ensure that the work of political education is permanent. For brothers and sisters outside of the AAPRP in Britain and Europe in general, number one, you must be sure to be in organizations which at least are giving a permanent base to the African culture. African culture is oppressed everywhere, even in Africa. Thus we know what it would be like in Europe. Thus this aspect of struggling hard to make sure that the culture of Africa is affirmed. Secretary says wherever Africans are, African culture must be affirmed. It doesn't mean that we come into conflict with others, we only affirm our culture. Thus this affirmation must be very, very strong, and here is a real task for Africans in the diaspora. Of course, they must understand that Africa is put first, and they must understand it precisely. They must know that the job of the Western capitalist media is to always paint Africa as a continent that is incapable of doing anything without Europe. But they must know that Africa developed science before Europe knew what science was. They must know their proper history. It's only when anchored in historical facts of the history that no winds of reactionary garbage will blow them anyway. They must come to know precisely Africa's role in history, what Africa has done. And it's only then that they will know they have a responsibility to ensure that Africa does this again. Consequently, their task must be to be organizations, affirm African culture, and to never allow themselves to think that they are inferior to anyone, and to assure this by putting Africa first. Only when Africa is unified, when she is strong, will Africans be respected and protected anywhere in the world, even in Europe. Thank you. Ready for revolution.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Kwame.
All right, please go on.
Comrade El Haj Mamou Bangura,
Camarade El Hadj Momo Bangura,
Vice Secretary General of the Party Democratic of Guinea,
secrétaire général adjoint du Parti démocratique de Guinée,
we, the delegation of the Britain chapter, All African People's Revolutionary Party,
nous, la délégation de chapitre de l'Angleterre, du Parti démocratique, du Parti révolutionnaire de tout peuple africain,
bring you revolutionary greetings.
nous vous donnons nos salutations révolutionnaires.
This is indeed the concretization of the coming together of the APRP and the Party Democratic of Guinea.
Ça, c'est pour consolider les liens qui existent entre le Parti démocratique de Guinée et le PRPA.
And I humbly thank you for being our host on this delegation.
Et nous vous remercions beaucoup pour nous avoir accueillis parmi vous ici.
I'd like to ask you just a few questions, starting off with this one.
Nous avons des questions à vous poser.
How important is the necessity for Africa developing its own ideology in the struggle for Pan-Africanism?
La première question est l'importance et la nécessité pour l'Afrique de développer une idéologie qui lutte pour le panafricanisme.
Merci, mon cher frère.
Thank you, my brothers.
Avant d'aborder la question que vous me posez,
Before starting the question that you just asked,
je voudrais avant tout, au nom de mon parti, le PDG RDA,
I want first of all, in the name of my party, PDG RDA,
au nom du secrétaire général de ce parti,
in the name of the Secretary General of the party,
Elhaj Ismaël Guissène,
Comrade El Hadj Ismaël Guissène,
notre candidat aux élections présidentielles du 5 décembre 1993.
the candidate for the PDG for the 1993 elections.
Je voudrais vous remercier tous et sincèrement
I want to thank you sincerely
du déplacement que vous venez de faire pour être en contact physique avec le Parti démocratique.
for coming physically to, as guest of the PDG.
Ce n'est pas la première visite que nous recevons des frères africains habitant en dehors du continent.
This is not the first time we receive our African brothers who are living outside of the continent.
En effet, en avril dernier, nous avions reçu un groupe très important de frères venant des États-Unis d'Amérique.
In fact, in April 1992, we received a delegation